Well, hello there, friends. Now, I've been seeing a lot of videos pop up on my feed from different Morrowind people, Elder Scrolls people, even some just general gaming people talking about this interview that Bruce Nesmith gave. And this guy, I've been familiar with him a little bit. I've like seen his face in certain dev things, and I know he's like some high ranking official at Bethesda or whatever, but I didn't quite understand exactly who he was. So this guy worked at Bethesda for Morrowind. He got a bigger role at Oblivion, and then he was the lead designer of Skyrim. And he had some comments recently about a Morrowind remaster. I'm sure you guys have all seen these by now. I'm a little late to the party on this. But basically, he said that he didn't think a Morrowind remaster was a good idea because he doesn't think they have the original code, and he doesn't think players these days would appreciate it. It's too old. Basically saying we all just have a bunch of nostalgia for the game, but if we played it now, it'd be cringe. I don't think he knows about my channel, guys. And this guy put together a really good list of like key points from the interview, and I read just a few of them, and I was like, all right, I got to read this whole interview. But some of the heavy hitters were, this is the guy that was in charge of streamlining the mechanics as the series went on. He wants the character system out of the player's way so they can just enjoy the moment. Yeah, so he's also the one who revamped the magic system for Skyrim. I think I'm starting to get a clearer picture of who this guy is. Alright, so let's just go through the actual interview and see what this guy says. This is kind of interesting. Actually, before we do, let's see exactly what he did with Morrowind. Bruce Nesmith role in Morrowind. Alright, so I'm having a hard time figuring out exactly what he did with Morrowind. I don't like to trust the AI overview, obviously, but it's saying he was not a lead designer for Morrowind, but was listed as giving special thanks to in the credits, even though he was a lot bigger of a designer on like Daggerfall and Skyrim. So someone with more knowledge, let me know in the comments exactly what he did with Morrowind, but it is kind of enlightening that the one game that's really, has a ton of depth to it and was stripped bare for all the remaining games was the one that this guy wasn't a big part of. Bruce Nesmith has called on Bethesda to make player choices count for more and build more dynamic worlds in order to meet fan expectations for the Elder Scrolls 6 and Fallout 5, an exclusive interview with digital PR agency Pressbox PR. Nesmith, who left Bethesda in 2021 midway through the development of Starfield, held a number of key roles at the studio, including lead designer for Skyrim, and is known as one of the architects of the radial questing system, aka just fucking bullshit. Just a waste of everyone's time. They could have made this radial questing system 100 times simpler and nobody would have even noticed because it wasn't even good. Just like, they could have just made it a randomizer. Alright, I don't care how he's been enjoying his career. Question: how far forward did you or the team look ahead to potential ways to take the world of the Elder Scrolls? Todd Howard sets the direction for the series and the games. His philosophy, which I completely subscribe to. Alright, this guy's a stooge. Technology seems to be becoming less and less advanced or sophisticated in the lands of Tamriel with each new entry in the series, especially comparing Morrowind and Skyrim. Was that an intentional idea, and is it intended to show magic is growing in power as technology is lost? It is intentional, but not for the reasons or methods that you're talking about. Morrowind was a high fantasy story. High fantasy was more popular at that point in time, but one of the things that Todd was drawn to is the idea that the world has a normality to it to make magic feel special, and to make all the other things that happen in the game more meaningful. I'm not sure what that means. If everybody's walking around teleporting up and down towers and all that stuff, it would make all those things feel a little bit less special. So while magic is understood and accepted in part of the world has a normality to it. When Skyrim was released, The Lord of the Rings had oh my god, it's true, had dominated the fantasy genre during the Oblivion period, and that high fantasy stuff wasn't quite as popular, so the magic and technology levels were brought down to meet the fantasy community where they were. Wow, alright. You hear a lot of fans who absolutely love Morrowind and think that was the peak of the Elder Scrolls series, me. And you know what? More power to them. That's because they love the high fantasy motif. No, it's not. Todd's views for Oblivion and Skyrim was to create more of a lower level of a fantasy setting. Ah yes, the nitty-gritty, low-level, grim, dark fantasy of Oblivion. Having laid the groundwork for the series, what is the one holy cow aspect of Elder Scrolls lore you think the team should be brave enough to break for the next game? The Dwemer are kind of like the Elder Scrolls version of Tom Bombadil. You don't really know what he is, but he's fascinating keeping them. So I'm getting the impression that this guy, the only fantasy this guy knows is like Elder Scrolls and Lord of the Rings, and he's just like, Lord of the Rings more popular. Me have to make every comparison to Lord of the Rings so people can understand what I mean. And I'm sure this guy's in Todd Howard's ear and they're just geeking out about Lord of the Rings, and that's why Oblivion turned out the way it was, why Cyrodiil was so different than it was described before Oblivion. Could the Elder Scrolls 6 explore new areas of the world on a different continent entirely? When you look at the known continents of Tamriel, there's a lot of space still to explore. One of the things that Tamriel does not need is more of that. I kind of agree with this. Is that belief in lowering barriers of entry for new players part of why there has been a constant concerted effort to streamline a lot of the traditional RPG elements in Oblivion and Skyrim? Do you think that trend will continue with the Elder Scrolls 6? Okay, this is a juicy one. Absolutely, and I led the charge on that, to be frank. You motherfucker. Obviously, I had to persuade Todd. Obviously, I had to persuade Todd, as he is the ultimate arbiter on these things, but I managed to do so. This guy is Satan! I did a lot of the character systems, and one of Todd's philosophies early on in Oblivion, which I took to heart and why I pushed so hard for these things, is that he wanted an interfaceless game, so ideally you just play the game. You just play it. Dude, have these guys not heard of action games? Like, you could just make an action game. It was about getting the character system out of the player's way. You don't have your head buried in menus, stats, and rules. Just enjoy the moment. It is a way to do that. In every version of the Elder Scrolls where I had any say in character systems, that is what I would push for. So this guy was the guy constantly in Todd's ear saying to remove all the RPG elements from the games. Oh, I have a new enemy on this planet. We got rid of attributes in Skyrim, and you know who complained? Almost nobody? They hardly even noticed it. This guy is a piece of shit. I love the whole idea that you do something, you get better at it. That's now a hallmark of the Elder Scrolls series, because you play the character you want to play, and you just know that's been in the game forever, even on the one you didn't work on. If you want to change, just start doing other stuff. You don't have to worry about where you are going to spend your points or how you're going to do this and do that. Just play the game. Let's get the game out of your way. To me, it has always been one of the great things about the progression of the Elder Scrolls titles. For those who do want more of a traditional RPG experience, is the answer that other titles are available rather than the Elder Scrolls rolling back on these changes? Yes. Play something else. If you look at Fallout, for example, and that's another Bethesda title, of course, they're embracing old school RPG. What? What do you mean, bro? They're doing the same thing with Fallout. There aren't even skills in Fallout anymore. That's by the same studio, by the way. We're not talking about a studio that has a bias. It's all about how each game... Oh, okay. So Elder Scrolls should not have any RPG systems. Fallout, we're just chalking it full of RPG systems. In Fallout, they want you to have that retro feel because everything in Fallout has a retro feel. It's a world based on... This guy is just making shit up like on the fly. The game rules do that as well. They're very old school RPG game rules where you get experience points and decide how to manage your character. You just pick a perk, just like Skyrim. You just pick a perk every time you level up. If you prefer those old school elements, there's a wealth of other games out there for you. Not really. There's pretty much no games like Morrowind, actually. There's RPGs, but there's no like first-person RPGs like Morrowind still. For the players who want, they will find games for that. Bethesda as a studio can be the best at doing both. With two different titles, but a single game can't be trying to do both. All right, I guess I just didn't realize that Fallout was the mega old school RPG. Fallout 4, the mega old school stats-based RPG. When you designed the Radiant Quest system, did you envision it becoming the industry standard, or do you feel it has been overused? Kurt and I were the primary drivers for the Radiant story system. It was based on a napkin drawing from Todd. I mean, you hear jokes about this, but it was literally on a napkin in the cafeteria. Whoa, Todd's such a genius. He drew this little circle and said, this is where I want things to go. It was one of those things where he provided the long vision for the direction he wanted us to take. And from that, Kurt and I proposed the Radiant system, and it went back and forth. I think the Radiant story system has actually taken a step back a bit. Not for bad reasons, but because the whole vibe of Fallout is more old school, therefore the whole Radiant system couldn't be utilized to the same extent as it could be in Elder Scrolls. What is this guy's thing with Fallout? It is not this old school ass RPG anymore. It's like just as dumbed down as Elder Scrolls was. The last three Bethesda titles, not counting Starfield, have been Fallout stories, so while the Radiant story system was used in the service of Fallout, it has been refined and improved and gone through all kinds of wonderful ideas. But there's aspects that were last used in Skyrim. They've been languishing because they did not serve where the Fallout games have needed. In Fallout, for example, vendors don't have schedules. Your NPCs don't have all this real world stuff where they go to bed and go here to eat and whatnot to the same extent as they do in Skyrim. That's because in old school RPG, you want the vendor to be there to serve the player. You're not. No, you could do both. One of the things that I did in the Shivering Isles was anytime an NPC was killed, all his stuff goes into his grave, and so you can go get his stuff. He's buried, and anything that's left there goes there. That kind of immersion doesn't make sense in Fallout. Why? There are things that you could do to elevate things even more in the next Elder Scrolls title, assuming that they wish to keep the Radiant system. I don't know what the team's plans are. They may decide to go in a different direction. They're very sensitive to what the audience is interested in. So, this guy not being a part of Elder Scrolls 6 is actually, a little reassuring. It's actually making me feel a little better. Not that I think that that game will definitely be good now because this guy's gone. There might just be another version of him. But this guy certainly wasn't helping things. GTA 6 is apparently going to push to create the most unprecedented AI for NPCs. Based on your experience with Bethesda's Radiant AI, what is the actual limit of making a city feel alive before the simulation starts to break under its own weight? Dude, they act like they made, real people in Skyrim, but they're just normal-ass NPCs that you'd find in any game. They just stand in one spot all day, and then at night they go into a bed that they just have assigned to their character. That's fucking all it is. And they're acting like they made this real world, but these NPCs do real things all day. They just have one work animation where a lady will stand at a fruit stall and sell 5 useless fruit that you can't even use, and then at night she just goes to a bed that her actor is assigned to, and that's it. What are they talking about? They're just rewriting history. They think we're so stupid. They think you are so stupid that they just think you'll be tricked by that, and that you just think these are real people as AI. In order to make the world feel alive in Skyrim, we had a very sophisticated system with Radiant Story, where if this NPC dies, this other one will take over their role. Whoa, dude! That's one line of code. It's just if Faendale dies, then this character stands there instead and gets the barter option. That's it. It's not that fucking hard, dude. But you go to Fallout, and Fallout is much more compartmentalized. The world has a completely different feel to it, and they didn't want to lose those cool NPCs that they had spent time crafting to put a second one in, and a third, and all. None of us care about that. Nobody gives a shit that the NPC gets replaced by a different NPC. Why is he stuck on this? Don't care about GTA 6. Don't care about his book. Do you agree that expectations are now so high that creating the Elder Scrolls 6 or Fallout 5 has become an impossible job? I am very fond of a phrase called the game of expectations, and I've been trotting the game of expectations out for well over a decade. Bethesda is in the bad position of having expectations being so high they cannot be met. Managing expectations is the number one thing a good marketing department has to do. Let's take a look at Starfield. Let's assume that a new studio had put out Starfield. I suspect it would be talked about like the second coming. But because it was released by Bethesda, the expectations were so much higher that it had been seen differently. Starfield is a good game. It's a very good game. It's just not the game that people expected it to be. Bro, this guy's smoking that copium. I don't agree at all. No Man's Sky was made by a new studio and everybody shit all over it. And instead of just crying and saying that they're wrong, they just improved the game and made it better. Now it's way better than Starfield ever will be. I also think to look at Baldur's Gate 3 and draw lessons from that MASH hit. That part of what made it so popular is that it felt like all choices were meaningful because you made a choice and it made a big difference in your play. Bethesda games have maybe pulled back from doing that a little bit. Oh, really? The focus is on putting your toys away, but in these games you do something in the Thieves Guild questline that completely changes what becomes of the Mages Guild, for example. The world and game has changed because of your choices. Have it make real impact. This kind of sounds like Morrowind. If I were in a position of being able to make the decisions, that's something that I would look to be doing because I think the gaming community has spoken and said they want games like Baldur's Gate 3 where their actions feel like they have impact in a broader sense. Okay, I'd agree with that. Do studios step away from having the player close off or change aspects of the game out of a fear that they won't experience all the content available to them? That was actually an intentional thing in Skyrim. The thinking was that we spent time and effort making this content. We want to make sure the player can experience it all. That was done intentionally, and I think those are good decisions. But as we're pointing out, every formula can get stale after a while, so maybe it's time to shake it up, do a little bit differently, and say all the content is available, but you need to do another playthrough to experience all of it. Okay. Alright, so they wanted you to be the leader of the Thieves Guild Companions, the College of Winterhold, and the Dark Brotherhood all in one playthrough in Skyrim. Where would you like them to take the Fallout series next? That's a good question. I think you need a place that is dripping in character, so I would look at places like New Orleans, St. Louis, or Orlando? Wait, Orlando would be hype. What happened to Disney World in the Fallout universe? That could be a ton of fun. I agree. You need a place that feels like it has a lot of character. It can't be cities that don't have that, and I'm focusing on cities because Fallout tends to be a game that's developed around cities. Some of the most impressive places that have already been done, like Vegas, I mean, that's a place that's just dripping. Boston and DC, I don't know if I agree with the Boston thing. It'd be interesting to take Fallout overseas, but no. How does the public perception of Todd Howard differ with the man you know? I can tell you candidly that when working at Bethesda up through the Skyrim days, Todd is probably one of the best bosses I've ever had. I can also tell you he's keenly aware of the fact that he is a bottleneck and he works his ass off to not do that. Unfortunately, he doesn't succeed very well. What does he mean by that? Does he mean that like everything has to go through Todd and Todd tries really hard not to reject everything, but unfortunately he can't help it and he rejects everything? I don't really know what he means. But this is not something where he's being an ogre about it. It's part of the culture of the studio, and that is extremely difficult to get away from because it's baked into how things are done. Even though he tries desperately not to, he does what he calls seagulling, where he swoops in and changes things. It still happens. A little bit of shade thrown at Todd, maybe? I'll give you the counterpoint, too. When you build games as big as Bethesda games, Todd was very good about saying, I care about this and this and this, and he spends a lot of time and attention on those things. We were left to go our own way on it. Not that he wouldn't come in and have to approve the work, but he would give a lot of leeway. You know, I revamped the entire magic system for Skyrim because I felt it was very old and cliched and it needed to be redone. Motherfucker! We had talks about it. He approved the general idea and he was very involved in that. Then he let me have my head. What does that mean? Not that we didn't have discussions about this particular thing or that, but I had a lot of freedom to create that. A lot of freedom. So Todd gave in, gave this guy the reins, and he completely scrapped the magic system from Morrowind and, you know, the slightly dumbed down version in Oblivion, and now we have Skyrim, which is just like Bioshock plasmids. It was the same with a lot of the character systems. He was very involved in the perks because he had a vision for what he wanted for that. On the underlying stuff, I had a tremendous amount of freedom to do what I wanted to do. I would say the reputation you just said is both earned and unearned because it's a big studio, it's a big project. We do big projects. We did big oh my god, I hate this guy. I'm very much a character systems kind of guy, says the guy that is responsible for cutting all the character systems out of the games. It's been 13 or 14 years since Skyrim released, so you could redo the magic system yet again. Quite frankly, the technology has moved forward a lot. You can make magic very cool and new. What if they made like some kind of system where you can make your own spells? Can you imagine? Oh yeah, here he's saying, you know, maybe you only have time to do the creatures, then you can't do the magic system. You got to pick and shoot. Dude, I hate these people. Skyrim's came out 15 years ago. Just do both. Just do both. You're one of the richest gaming companies of all time. Just do both. All right, here's the big one that everybody was talking about. I don't have a ton to add to this, I don't think, but let's see exactly what he says. I don't know if I've read this whole excerpt yet. So the question is, why do Bethesda seem resistant to remaking Morrowind despite the massive fan demand? The problem with doing Morrowind is that I bet they don't have the original code. The game is so old. I don't know if the original source code exists anymore. If it does, can you even compile it? Maybe the OpenMW team can help you with that. When you're looking at Oblivion, they still had the code. They could still compile it. Putting the code into the new version of the engine was a possibility. The other thing I would say is go back and play Morrowind and tell me that's the game you want to play again. We all have these fond memories of things that were pivotal moments in our gaming fantasy histories that we absolutely move. What? But you go back and play a 20-year-old game and you will cringe. People even had cringe moments with the Oblivion remake, but they forgave it because they're reliving something. They're enjoying the nostalgia. I worked on Oblivion. I'm even responsible for some of those cringe moments. The further back you go, the more that's going to be an issue. The reality of playing Morrowind would not stand the test of time, in my opinion. I like to play Morrowind. Now, if you were to completely remake Morrowind with the Skyrim engine to try and rebuild it from the ground up, that's a whole other story, but that's an entire project. That's a whole 4-year development cycle. Why not go and make something new? Let's revisit the lands of Morrowind and do a new story. You can include the giant crab palace and all that stuff, but make it new and avoid all the things that would not have survived the test of time. I guess I should just say, I don't think they should remake Morrowind either, because if they do, they're just going to bastardize it, and, you know, they're not going to be able to voice all that dialogue, so they're either going to super simplify the dialogue and voice that, or they're going to use AI to read it to you, like mods do, and either one is going to get them canned by the players, rightfully so. I don't think we need a remake of Morrowind. I think just OpenMW with Tamriel rebuild is already perfect, but if you're someone that can't handle those visuals, then there's mods to make it look pretty, and that's what we got, and that's fine. That's what we should keep. Like if they remake Morrowind, guys, I'm telling you, it's going to be a disaster, and it's my favorite video game. I don't want them to ever do it. Rumor has it that the Elder Scrolls 6 will return to Iliac Bay, with fans theorizing the teasers we've seen so far, hinting at High Rock and Hammerfell being the locations of the next game in the series. How rich is that location as a setting to revisit? I don't think you have an area that isn't rich in potential in Tamriel. I think you don't want to step on the toes of things you've recently done yourself. Let's not go back to Cyrodiil, for example. Wow, this guy's a genius. But I think Hammerfell and High Rock would be great places to go. I don't. I'm tired of only doing the human lands. I want us to do an elf land or a beast race land. I think they could go to Somerset Isle and the other islands and do great stuff there. I think it's been long enough that you could revisit Morrowind. Why? No. Just do a new one. I don't think you can say this area is boring and therefore not worthy of Elder Scrolls 6. I don't think there is such a place in Tamriel, and that's by design. You're making a game world. You make everything cool and interesting. Well, Cyrodiil was really cool and interesting, and then when it came time to make Cyrodiil, you stripped all that out and just made, like, Diet Lord of the Rings. If anything, there's places that would be too interesting. What the hell? I think Elsewhere would be a challenge where it's cat people who change the nature of their catness as they mature. That one might be a little challenging to do. Oh, heaven forbid we have a cool alien world to explore and get lost in. Alright, so that's pretty much everything Elder Scrolls related from the interview. This guy's basically my #1 mortal enemy on Earth now. Yeah, also there was this guy from, the Baldur's Gate 3 and Divinity team, publishing director Michael Cromwell Dow said, okay, call me optimistic, but there is a very technically qualified developer out there that would happily remake Morrowind with a modern combat system, and it would sell like fucking hotcakes. It probably would sell well. I don't know if it's something I want. I like the current combat system in Morrowind, and changing it would change a lot. And how would they do the dialogue? Would it still just be text-based? So they're probably going to want it voiced, and to do that, it'll probably have to be AI voice reading. I don't know if I agree with this guy, but I like him sticking up for my favorite game. Thanks for trying. And yeah, so that's everything from the interview with this Bruce Nesmith guy. Gave me a new target for my hatred. I used to put all the blame on Todd, but now it seems like Todd had a little guy whispering in his ear that he couldn't resist. Ugh. Alright guys, and I guess that's my reaction or whatever to, what's this dipshit's name? Bruce Nesmith's comments on Morrowind and Elder Scrolls as a whole. I guess my main takeaways are, this guy's my mortal nemesis. He is just happily exclaiming that he removed all the best parts of Morrowind from the Elder Scrolls series and is responsible for dumbing down everything in Skyrim and removing skills and, changing the magic system and incorporating the incredible Radiant AI system, which is basically just fetch quests from random NPCs. And he thinks he's a genius for that, and he thinks Fallout still keeps the hardcore RPG elements for someone like me, and he thinks they should do a Starfield too. So this guy is basically just Satan, Epstein, this guy is just the worst guy ever, just doesn't know what he's fucking talking about. Now he's gone from the company, so hopefully we can get back on track here. I kind of don't think so. I think Todd is lost in the sauce as well, but yep, that's my takeaways from the interview. Let me know what you guys think about Bruce Nesmith's comments here, and don't forget to buy his new novel. He's a writer, and I'm sure his writing is going to be very interesting, and he definitely doesn't think you guys are all idiots, and he has to dumb down all his thoughts to appeal to you idiots. So that's my reaction. Thanks for watching, guys. Y'all have a blessed day.